When you go quiet, the narcissist does not feel calm. They feel panic. This is because silence, your silence, is the single thing they cannot control, manage, or change. If you have ever asked yourself what happens in their mind day by day when you stop feeding their ego, stay here. What they think will surprise you. If this feels true to you, already pause for a second, breathe. You are not imagining how they react. You are not thinking too much about your silence. You are taking back your power. The more you understand how they work, the more control you get back over your own life. So stay with me. On the first day, the real mental effect of your silence starts. It hits the narcissist harder than anything you have ever said to them. The moment you stop replying, they do not see it the way a normal person would. They don't think maybe you need space or maybe something is wrong. Instead, their mind snaps to one thing: ego panic. Your silence is not neutral to them. It is an insult, a threat, and a challenge to the image they have of themselves. They are used to you reacting, explaining, defending, or making them feel better. The moment all of that goes away, they feel the ground move under them. They feel a sudden loss of control, and control is like air to them. Without it, they cannot breathe. On this first day, they think through every expected thought. They won't last. They always come back. They need me more than I need them. These thoughts are not based on truth. They are based on the fantasy world they built, where they are the center and everyone else circles around them. Your silence breaks that world a little, and breaks bring fear, but they hide that fear with pride. They tell themselves you are playing a game and they are still winning. They may even smile at the idea that you are trying to get a reaction out of them because, in their mind, you are not able to leave. Under the pride is restlessness. They cannot sit still. They check their phone more than usual. They scroll through old messages. They look for signs that you are still paying attention to them. They might even play old voice notes, not because they miss you, but because they are trying to prove to their ego that they still matter and are still in charge. Your silence brings the one thing they cannot handle: uncertainty. They don't know what you are thinking. They don't know what you are planning, and they don't know what is coming next. That mental mess is torture for them. Even on day one, the cracks in their confidence start to show. By the second day, the silence starts to sink in, and the narcissist begins to feel something they hate to admit: withdrawal. Not emotional withdrawal, but control withdrawal. They relied on your reactions much more than you knew. Your responses, even the angry ones, kept them going. They fed off your attention, your explanations, and your wish to fix things. When all of that suddenly vanishes, they feel it like an addict feels the lack of their drug. They become restless, distracted, and oddly focused on you. They begin checking for any sign that you might give in. Did you view their story? Did you post something sad? Did you like something by mistake? They are looking for proof that you are still within their reach. On day 2, their mind goes into analysis mode. They read your last messages again. They see your silence as a tactic, not a boundary. They think you are doing this to get attention because that is how they work. They assume your silence is an act, not a choice. They start imagining how long you will last, telling themselves you won't be able to keep it up. Every hour that passes without a message from you adds more annoyance to their ego. They won't admit this annoyance to anyone. In fact, they might act colder, louder, or more distant on the outside, pretending they don't care. But inside, they are running mental laps, trying to figure out why you aren't responding the way they guessed. This is also the day they become spies. They watch your online activity like it is a job. They check times, profile changes, and updates, anything that tells them you are still aware of them. But the real fear growing inside them is simple. What if you aren't checking them at all? What if your silence isn't a game? What if they actually lost their grip on you? Day 2 is where their confusion mixes with worry, and for the first time they start to sense that something is moving out of their control. On day 3, the narcissist's ego starts trying to protect itself. Your silence has now lasted long enough to make them uncomfortable, so they start doing what they do best: changing the story to favor themselves. They cannot accept the idea that you step back because you are tired, hurt, or finally done. That truth is too scary, so instead they create stories that soothe their ego and let them feel superior again. They tell themselves you are being dramatic. They convince themselves you are too emotional, too attached, or too invested to stay quiet for long. In their mind, this is not a boundary. It is a plan for attention. They truly believe you are still circling them even if you aren't speaking. They begin making up fantasies where you are thinking about them constantly, checking your phone, waiting for them to reach out. They may even imagine scenes where you come back apologizing. This isn't a false belief just for fun. It is self-protection. Their ego cannot handle the idea that someone might disconnect without their permission. So they create a version of reality where they are still in charge, even when the proof says otherwise. On day 3, they might also start changing the story to make themselves the victim. They think, I didn't do anything wrong, or they are overreacting, or they are trying to control me. This victim mindset gives them mental cover. It keeps them from looking at their behavior or taking blame. Blame becomes a shield, and they hold it tight. What is interesting is that while they are rewriting the story in their head, they are also watching you more closely. They want every piece of info that supports the story they are building. If you are quiet, they will say you are pouting. If you are active online, they will say you want attention. If you post something happy, they will say you are faking it. No matter what you do, they spin it to fit the story that keeps them safe from blame. Day 3 is where the fantasy gets stronger because facing reality would mean admitting they are losing control, and that is something their ego refuses to do. When day 4 comes, the narcissist's inner world starts to change from denial to annoyance, and that annoyance quickly turns into anger. Your silence, which they first ignored and then tried to explain away, has now become a threat to their feeling of being better than you. They don't see your silence as a boundary or response to what they did. No, they see it as disrespect. It hurts their ego in a way they can't handle. When a narcissistic ego is hurt, the first reaction isn't sadness. It is rage, quiet rage or loud rage, but rage all the same. On this day, they begin mentally lowering your value to get back a sense of power. They start telling themselves, you were never that special, never that important, never that hard to replace. They run through every flaw they think you have, every mistake you ever made, and every moment you were weak. This mental lowering is their way of making you small so they can feel big again. In their mind, if they can convince themselves you weren't valuable, then losing your attention doesn't matter. But the truth is, the meaner they get in their head, the more threatened they actually feel. They might also start acting in ways that look cold or careless. They could act happier on social media, post something to get attention, or pretend they have moved on. They aren't doing this because they are fine. They are doing it because they want you to see it. They want you to feel small. They want you to react. But your silence takes away their access to your emotions, and that only makes their anger grow. Inside, they are fighting a bigger fear. If you can stay silent this long, maybe you are actually slipping away. Maybe they don't have the power they thought they did. They won't admit that fear, even to themselves, so they bury it under pride, insults, and fake superiority. Day 4 is when they try the hardest to convince themselves you don't matter. But funny enough, it is also the day you fill their mind the most. By day 5, the narcissist's inside panic finally starts to show through the cracks of their pride, even if no one else can see it. Until now, they tried to control the story. First with confidence, then with denial, then with anger. But now, your silence has lasted longer than they expected. Something starts shifting inside them. They won't say it out loud, but they are worried. Not worried about losing you as a person, but worried about losing what you gave them. Attention, praise, emotional work, stability, the feeling of being important. You were a source of supply, and now that source has gone quiet. That is when they feel the shortage. Behind closed doors, they start wondering who will fill the gap. They need someone to listen, someone to react, someone to admire them, someone to fix their ego. Without that, they feel empty, bored, restless, and annoyed. They might start looking around for replacements. Old flames, friends, online contacts, anyone who can give them the attention they lost. But even as they do that, they still can't ignore the discomfort your silence causes. It is like an itch they can't scratch, a reminder that something slipped out of their hands. On day 5, their thoughts become messy and changing. One moment they try to tell themselves you are unimportant. The next moment they wonder why you haven't broken yet. Then comes a flash of fear. What if you are moving on? What if someone else is giving you the validation they used to keep for themselves? What if you realized your worth? These thoughts scare them. That fear mixed with insecurity drives them to overthink your silence more than they ever expected. They won't reach out directly yet because their pride is still in the way, but deep inside they are watching, waiting, and counting because for the first time, the chance is becoming real. They might be losing their grip on you. And that is the one result they never prepared for. On the sixth day, the narcissist panic turns into a plan. At this point, your silence has lasted long enough to upset them, annoy them, and force them to question the power they believe they had over you. They aren't just uncomfortable anymore. They are threatened. When a narcissist feels threatened, they don't look inside themselves. They don't apologize. They don't suddenly understand your pain. Instead, they switch into testing mode. They want to know one thing: do they still have access to you? On this day, their mind becomes tactical. They start planning small, low-risk ways to get your attention without fully showing their ego. They will never send something open or direct. Not yet. They will send something tiny, something they can pretend meant nothing if you don't respond. A like on an old picture, a reaction to a story, a random one-word message, a question mark, a funny picture, a song line, something that looks like an accident but is actually very planned. These tiny clues are their way of knocking on the door without admitting they want back in. This isn't love. This isn't care. This is bait. They are trying to measure how tight the hook still is in you. They want to know if you will respond fast, slow, with anger, or with emotion. Because any reaction tells them they still matter. Any reaction proves to them that their supply isn't gone. Silence, however, tells them the opposite. That you are slipping out of their control, and that scares them far more than losing the relationship itself. Inside, they are restless, annoyed, and deeply curious. They start imagining how you will react to their attempt. They prepare excuses in case you ignore them. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to send that. Just checking something. These excuses protect their ego so they can pretend they weren't reaching out on purpose. But behind the scenes, that tiny action is a huge admission. They can't fully handle your silence anymore. Day 6 is where their mask cracks. They test you not to reconnect, but to prove to themselves that they still have power. And if you stay silent through their test, it shakes them more than you will ever see. Day 7 is when the fear hidden under the narcissist's mask finally starts to come up. Until now, they have gone through shock, denial, ego stories, anger, and attempts to test you. But on this day, something darker begins to creep in, the fear of being exposed. Your silence has lasted long enough that they can no longer predict you, read you, or control your reactions. That uncertainty threatens them more than anything else. They begin thinking, what if you figured me out? This idea that you may finally see who they really are scares them in a way they will never show. They start playing past moments in their mind, not because they miss you, but because they are looking for clues. Did they slip up? Did they reveal too much? Did they go too far in their tricks? Narcissists rely heavily on confusion, distraction, and emotional fog to keep control. But silence clears that fog. Silence gives you space to think, to reflect, to connect dots they hoped you would never connect. On day 7, they sense that shift. They fear that you are no longer under their spell. Another fear hits them. What if you are telling other people? Their reputation, their image, their carefully built face, it is everything to them. The idea that you may be speaking the truth about their behavior frightens them deeply. Your silence signals that you have pulled back your emotional energy. When someone pulls back emotionally, they often start seeing things clearly. A narcissist knows this. They know that once the emotional confusion is gone, their behavior becomes clear to see. So they worry silently inside. They may act cold, confident, or unbothered on the surface, but inside they are restless, walking around, overthinking. They don't know whether your silence means you have moved on, whether you are done for good, or whether you have finally recognized their patterns. That not knowing is torture for them. Day 7 is when they feel the weight of losing control, losing influence, and losing their ability to control the story. For a narcissist, that loss is crushing. On day 8, the narcissist's desperation crashes into their pride, creating a mental storm they can't hide from themselves anymore. Your silence has lasted long enough that it can't be brushed off as a mood, a phase, or a tactic. Now it feels real. Now it feels like distance. Distance for a narcissist is danger, because distance means you are thinking clearly. Distance means you are no longer reacting. Distance means you are slipping out of the emotional cage they built for you. On this day, their thoughts swing between two extremes. One moment, they pump themselves up with fake confidence. They can't live without me. They always come back. They need my attention. These thoughts are bandages for their ego to cover the growing wound your silence is creating. The next moment, those bandages fall off and fear hits them like a wave. What if they are actually done? What if they met someone else? What if they have seen the truth? They hate these thoughts because they expose the one thing they don't want to admit: you mattered more than they ever said. This is also the day they start preparing to come back, but on their terms. They begin imagining how they might reach out in a way that protects their ego. They practice messages in their mind, something casual, something funny, something that sounds unbothered. But underneath all those practiced texts is a single motive. They want proof that you still answer their call. However, they won't send anything yet. Their pride is still too loud. Instead, they try to gather info, they sneak around, they check your social media. More often, they try to figure out your silence like it is a puzzle they have to solve. They wonder if you are healing. They wonder if you are waking up. They wonder if you have seen the cycle. Deep down, they know something is happening that they cannot reverse. Your mind is clearing, your emotions are settling, your view is getting sharper. Their biggest fear becomes clear. Your silence is changing you, and they cannot control who you are becoming without them.